Hi, we are going to talk about JavaScript HTML DOM manipulation today. This is the first lecture of two. And the learning objective for today is the student has acquired the skills needed to select and apply key principles, technologies and methods to the programming of complex digital user interfaces. Usually when we have changed the DOM previously, we've used the method where we add HTML tags to a string, to a text string, and then inject that text string into the HTML document. But the right way of doing this, especially if you're working with large websites and you have a lot of manipulation and you are concerned about spending browser resources, then you should use another method, which we're going to look at today. Yes, let's get on with it. First of all, download the zip file from today's lecture, which is JavaScript HTML DOM manipulation. It's on Canvas. Unpack it somewhere where you can find it again, in your work folder, whatever. Open the index.html with the browser, and open Visual Studio Code and open the unzipped folder with Visual Studio Code. Then open the index.html and the script.js files in the editor. You can pause the video and do that now. Okay, as you can see, we've got the standard file assortment here. I've got an index.html file, we've got an assets folder with some CSS, fav icons, and an image folder, and a script file. So let's see. The index.html file is sort of the standard stuff in header, and then in body I have loaded it with some HTML for you. We've got the body tag, of course, the main tag, and we've got an article tag around the whole thing that has an ID called remove this article. There's some classes on it, and we've got an h1, a headline, and some content in a p tag, and an h2 secondary headline, and underneath that h2 we've got an unordered list with some items, and each of these items have got an ID. The unordered list itself has got an ID as well. We've got a div with an image with the class hide. It's got a title, there's an image ID, etc. Then we've got a second h2 with another list, another unordered list, and that unordered list has got an ID as well. There's no ID on the items themselves, and we'll use that for our script. So, all right. First off, we are going to look at the querySelector to find an element to manipulate. We can find it using we can find a single one using querySelector. So let's try that out. Let's find the first list item, which is this one, right, in our HTML DOM. So if I do a querySelector for a list item tag, an li tag, that means that I should only get one back, which should be the first one here. But let's see how we do. So I'm gonna create a variable with it. I'm gonna call it elm for element, and I'm gonna call it first li, and I'll set that to be equal to document querySelector. And instead of going for an ID or a class name or anything like that, I'm going for the element name, which is list item. Let's find that, and I'm gonna console log it just so that we can see what's happening. Console log elm first li. Alright. So what happens when we do this? Well, it returns the list item with the ID li1, first item it says. Okay, type this in and check your console, make sure it works. Pause the video now and do that. Okay, what if we want to find, let's say we want to find an element using some more complicated CSS. Well, let's try to find one using the ID, for instance. Let element second li, sorry, be equal to document querySelector. Let's find the second element by ID. So that's ID li2. If we look at the HTML, we can see that it's got ID li2, so we can find it using that. And let's just copy this one. Elm second, there we go. So now we should have we've got the first item and we've got the second item from the two different console logs. Let's do a couple more before you pause and type in. So if we want to do something a bit more complicated, we can, for instance, do something like the CSS selector where you use nthChild, for instance. I'll just get this done. Third list item, yes, there we go. So let's find any list item that is the third child. And you use the nth child. What's that called? That's called a pseudo selector. With the colon here, and then nth child, and we want the third one. So now we should get the third list item here when we console log. Let's try that out. Yes, we've got the third. Great. And you can replace this number by anything. And if you want to, you can you can get more than one. That's actually a neat trick. But that's not for today. We can talk about that later. And then what happens if we look for an element that has children? What do we get then when we find one? Let's try finding the unordered list itself. I'll call the variable elmul. Say that's equal to document querySelector, and we'll just find the first unordered list that's present. So we'll find it by the tag name ul, and let's console log that. And let's see what happens then. Okay, so we actually got the entire element with all of the children that belongs to that element. So, and I'm guessing any other descendant from the element would be present as well. So the children and the children's children, etc., would show inside of this. We can actually see if we can we use I'll use main. Then we should get the entire HTML DOM, not the entire DOM, but whatever's in main. Yep, we got that. So you can use that to grab a series of element, all the descendants from a certain point. Okay, type all of this in. Make sure that it's like this, and test it in your console. You should have something like this when you're done. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so we've used querySelector, which finds the first element that matches whatever we're looking for But what if we want to find more than one element? We can use querySelectorAll, which finds several one or more elements, 0 or 1 or more elements actually, because if there's not anything that matches, then it will return nothing. But let's find all list items and console log those. So let's try that. I'm calling this variable ARR for array underscore list item underscore li, because I know it will return an array. But if we look for document.querySelectorAll and we look for any elements that is of the type list item and we console log those, let's see what we get. Okay, so we've got a node list here of 8, and if we look at our HTML, we've got one unordered list here with 4 items, and we got one unordered list here with 4 items. So that matches the amount at least. And we can see if we extend the list here, we can see that on index 0 we've got a list item with the ID list item 1. List item 2, list item 3, list item 4, etc. The last 4 don't have any IDs because they don't have any IDs up here. Okay. Yes. Let's see. Yeah. Let's have you type this in and make sure that it works before we go ahead. You can pause the video now. Okay, so what if we want to do something with these? We can use a for loop to loop through the list items and do something with them. And you do this because it's an array. You can just use for, and I usually use the variable name I to as my count marker. As long as I is lesser than the length of the array, then we keep going, and for every iteration we add 1 to I. So I starts out as 0. As long as I is lesser than the length of the array, then we add 1 at the end of each turn, right? And let's just try console logging this for each of them. So now we've got an array, right? So we can use the square brackets and we'll use I as a counter for it. So for every time when we're at position 0, it will use 0 instead of I, so it will return the array's item at position 0, which is the first one. And then we loop through and it gets to be 1, 2, 3, etc., depending on how long the array is. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we had our node list here, and then it starts looping through and it goes with the different elements. So we get the elements and we can do stuff with them. Great. Let's see. Yeah, instead of using for, you can do something else. You can use a forEach loop, and it looks slightly different. Let's try that out. So I will just do something here to make it easier to look at. Console log for loop, which means that now in console we should have this line here. Yes, for loop. Yes, good. And I'll copy this and move it down here, and we'll do a forEach loop instead. forEach loop. And we can say, then we use our array, the variable with our array. So we go with the array list item dot forEach, Now we've got this function here where we can do something with it. The parameter we've got this method forEach method, and the parameter for this forEach method is a function. What do we do for each item that we find in the array? Well, we use a function on each item in this case, and we look at each element. So element is a parameter that we pass to it, so that we have a name for each of the elements in our function here. Let's see, and we want to console log each of them. So console log elm. Let's see what happens. And I want this to be a bit neater. We've got this for each that starts here and ends here, so I'm gonna do something like this to make it prettier to look at. Yes, and I'll add a semicolon down here just for good measure. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, we've got the forEach loop, which does the exact same thing, but we avoid having all of this counting stuff done, right? Okay, try typing this in and make sure that it outputs what it should. Okay, so pause the video and do that. Okay, a weakness with this is that we don't have the number. We don't know I for one of these, so that can be solved, luckily. So let's try that. For each loop with I counter. Okay, so let's try to do that, and we can do that by, up here we're using elm as a replacement for the current element in our forEach loop. We can actually add a counter in there as well. So I can copy this, and in our element here I can just add comma I, which will be the counter of the other one, the same as the normal for loop. So if I do it like this, and I'm console logging the I variable, and I'm console logging element, I should have the current position and the value of that element output in the console. So I'll be looking for this for each loop with I counter in console now, and figure out what happens underneath it here. Okay, so we've got for each loop with I counter where it says 0, then it comes out with the first list item 1, second list item 2, third list item, etc. So that works, right? Try typing this in and make sure that it works. Okay, and we can do this as well using the new standards for JavaScript, which is the ES6 standards, and we'll try doing it with an arrow function instead of a normal function, and it's just something that you will run into when you do more complicated JavaScript. So you might as well get to know it a little bit now. To get an idea of how it works. So let's try this with an arrow function first. We've got the same for each as we wanted to do before. So we'll go for the array of list items. We're doing a for each, and in here, instead of writing function I'll write elm, which was the parameter that we used before, as you can see here. Elm, yes. And it's called an arrow function because I'm doing this. I'm writing equals to greater than, and that kind of creates an arrow. And now I jump directly to my curly brackets. So what I can do in here is the exact same thing as I'm doing up here. So I can just console log element. This is another way of writing the same thing, but you can do more specific stuff with the arrow functions that we won't come into right now. But just so that you know that if you find the arrow here somewhere, that is basically a function that actually loops through something, or takes each instance of that type of element and does something to it in this case. But let's see if this works first. Okay, so we've got our for each loop with arrow function. That seems to be working fine. I'm going to do one more thing, because we had the for each loop with the I as well, with the counter, and I want to do one of these with a counter as well. So let's try that out with arrow function and I counter, just to make things wonderful. So as you saw before, we had elm and I we put in there. This just refuses to clean up. This is messy. Let's see, format document. Oh, that's better. Good. So we have the I as a counter up here. Let's try to do something with that. When we've got an arrow function, we can do the same thing, but I can't call it I have to call it index. So I'll do that. So let me just copy this bit here, because I can use the same thing. And I have elm, but let's add something else. And to do that, I have to add parentheses around these, because this is basically a way of saying, well, if there's just one, we know it's a parameter. If there's more than one, we're not certain if it's a parameter or what we're doing here syntax-wise. So if we add the parentheses around it, we know that it's a parameter for the function. And let's do this where I output index in one of them and elm in the other one. Let's see if it works. Okay, so for each loop with arrow function and I counter, that seems to be working as well. Great. Can I replace this with an I? Let's try it out, see what happens. Well, I can, so that's fair enough. So you are able to do that actually, so let's do that. Okay, type this in and make sure that it works by checking your console. So pause the video and do that now. Okay. I am gonna comment all of this out. You can leave it in if you want to. I'm gonna comment it out to make things a little more clear in console. But let us try to manipulate some DOM here and figure out how we do stuff. I have got an image in our index.html. This one. It's got a class on it called hide. Let's say that I want to show that image. And I can do that by removing this class hide. What happens if I do that? Well, then our curling cat shows up here. So let's try to see if we can do that by using JavaScript instead of me using the developer console. If we want to remove an attribute, we first have to find the element that the attribute is on. So let's find that element. I'll call my variable image. and I'll set it to be equal to document querySelector, and we'll find that image by using the ID. Image ID it's called. So let's find that. Hashtag image ID. Good. And the way we can remove an attribute is actually just by using the removeAttribute method. Pretty simple. So image, which is our element, dot remove attribute. And we need to tell it what kind of attribute we want to remove. And we do that by passing a piece of text to it. So quotation marks and the name of that attribute that we want to remove. Let's see in our HTML what happens. Okay, so we can see that the class attribute is completely gone. So the attribute has not been emptied, it has actually been removed. Cool. Try to type this in and make sure that it works. You can pause the video and do that now. Okay, this is all good and fun, but what if we want to change an attribute instead of removing it? Let's say that we want to replace the image that we're showing. We don't want this curling cat here. I think it's nice, but never mind. I want something else. I want a GIF or GIF, depending on your whatever. So let's find the image element again by using the image variable, and I'm gonna set the source for something else. I'm gonna set it for another image that I know exists in my assets. Images / bloodband.gif, and I'm gonna change the title tag as well. Oh, sorry, the title attribute as well. And that is the title attribute on the image, not on the web page. I'm gonna set that to be equal to bloodband. Okay, so let's see what happens when I reload the page now. Okay, we've got Jean-Claude Van Damme and the other guy from Bloodsport doing some weird stuff here. And as you can see, the image has got the title Bloodband now, so if I hover above it, that's what it will show. And the source attribute has changed value from the old curling cat image to bloodband.gif. Okay, try typing this in now and make sure that it works. You can pause the video and do that now. So what if we want to remove an element from the HTML DOM? We can use removeChild. There's a method for that called removeChild. And to use that, we have to find the parent element first and then remove the child element we want to remove. So let's say we want to remove, if we go to HTML, we want to remove this article tag. What we basically do is we find the main tag first, and then use the removeChild method, and find the article that, or the element that we want to remove, the child element of main that we want to remove. Let's try that out. So first of all, we need to find the main element. So find element main. Here I'm creating a new variable called element main, and I'll set that to be equal to document.querySelector main. So now we have the parent element of the element that we want to remove, and I want to remove which article do I want to remove? I want to remove these variable names are not important. You can call them whatever you want. I just call them something that I think makes sense right now. So document querySelector, and what we want to remove is the article, and I'm gonna be very specific and find it using the ID. There we go. So now I have two elements put inside of these variables. I have the main tag and I have the specific article that I want to remove. And how you use removeChild is you take the parent element, which is element main in this case, and then you use removeChild. And as an parameter to removeChild, you add the element that you want to remove, which is the child element of element main here. So now we should have the body tag and the main tag, but nothing besides that in the HTML. Let's reload. So we've got body and main. Good. Yeah. Try typing this in and make sure that it works. We'll do something like this, but slightly different later on. There are simpler ways of finding the parent element, but let's try typing this in so that you know how you can do it and the long way around. Just pause the video now and do that. Okay, let's say we want to create a new article tag with some new content. So we can use I'm gonna create a new article here, which is just a variable called new article, but I'm gonna create an element with this. The element has not been put inside of the HTML DOM yet, but I'm just gonna create it in the browser's memory for now. Document.createElement. And as a parameter, you pass a string that is the same as the tag name of the element. And this element is an article, so it will be the article tag that I want to article. There we go. So now new article is an HTML element called of the type article, but it hasn't been put into the DOM yet. It doesn't exist in the DOM yet. We need to put it somewhere. But before we do that, we add some stuff to it. I want to add some stuff to it. I'm gonna create a new headline for it, and I'm gonna make that an H1. And in this case, I'm gonna say document create element H1. So now we've got a headline in this variable, right? Which is an H1. But we don't have any text inside of that H1. We can do this by saying, well, I want to do something to new headline, to the new headline variable here, which is the element. And I'm gonna add some text content to it. So I can use the method text content, and or actually it's a property of it. I'm setting the text content to be equal to my headline. So now I've got article and I've got an H1 with the content of my headline. Let's see if that works first. So I'll just console log these. If I console log the article tag first, new article. Let's see what happens then. We've got an article tag. Okay, it doesn't exist in the DOM yet. It's not up here. It's just down here, right? So it's just in our JavaScript code for now. What about the new headline? Let's see about that. Well, it's still it doesn't exist in our HTML DOM up here yet. It's just a tag that exists inside of our JavaScript. And you can see it's an H1 and it's got some content. It's got my headline. as content. So the thing about using the text content property, that worked fine. Okay, so write these lines and make sure that it works by checking the console. Just pause the video and do that now. Okay, so if we actually want to add these new elements that we have created inside of our HTML DOM, we can use the method appendChild. And what I want to do first is I want to add the h1 to the article, right? So I want to add new headline to new article. And I do this by saying, well, new article, appendChild. And the thing I want to append is the new headline. So I'm appending new headline. Okay, so let's just try console logging new article again here. And I will comment out these two so that we don't get a mess of console logging. So new article, appendChild, new headline. This means that we should now have, when we output new article to the console, we should have an article tag with an h1 inside of it, with the my headline text inside of that h1. Let's see what happens. Okay, we've got the article tag and we've got the h1 inside of it. It's still not in the DOM. It's still not put inside of the web page, but it exists in browser memory, right? So we are building up this this element right now called new article. And the way that we put this into the DOM is that we find the place that we want it to be, and then we append child it again, like we did with the new headline inside of new article. So I want to add it to the main tag. So let's find that main tag. We can say document querySelector main. That's the main tag we've got now. And now we want to append child here. And what we want to append is just new article, because new article contains the headline. There we go, new article. So let's see what happens in the HTML document. Okay, so we've got a new headline in our document. So we are taking our new article element that's inside of this variable, and we're adding it, we're appending it to the main tag, right? You should have something that looks like this when you got it right. So please pause now, type this in, and make sure that you got it right. Okay, we can do something else where we, instead of first removing a child element and then appending a child element, we can replace a child element, which means that we're doing both in one swap here. And for that we've got the replaceChild method, which is pretty neat. We could have done that instead of all of the things that we're doing up here, but let's just let's keep that code and do something else instead. I want to find the h1 element and I want to replace it with an h2 instead, with some new text inside of it. So let's first find the old h1 element that we put in, old child element, I'm gonna call it, so we know what we're dealing with. That's just the variable name. We'll set that to be equal to document querySelector, and we've only got one h1 in our document right now, so I'll just find that. And now I want to create a new element, so let's do that. New child element, Again, it's just a variable name. You can call it whatever you want. Document create element h2. So right now I haven't done anything in the HTML DOM, right? I have copied the element of h1, or actually I have found the element of h1 and put it inside of this variable. And I have created a new element, not in the browser, not in the HTML DOM yet. I have created the element and put it inside of this variable. It doesn't exist in the HTML DOM yet. But let's add some text to this h2. So I'm gonna say a new child element, text content. Set that to be equal to replaced headline, so that we know that it's replaced. Again, this has not been put into the HTML DOM yet. It just exists inside of this variable. It's an element. It's an element that's put inside of that variable. But let's replace it in the DOM. So what we do is we find the original element that we want to replace first. So old child element, and then we use then we have to find the parent element of that. It's sort of like the removeChild, right? Because this is a replaceChild. So we find the parent element of the element that we want to replace. Let's go through this out here. We've got article and we've got an h1. So we're finding this element, right? That's the old child element. We find that by using querySelector. And then we say, well, parent element to that element, which is article. Let's try that. Old child element dot parent element. Actually, let's hold up here and console log this. Console log child old child element dot parent element. Let's see what happens in console. Which element do we get here? We get the article tag, which is what we're looking for. I'm just gonna comment this one out. So we've got the article tag, which is the parent element. So this is good. We're finding the right one. So old child element dot parent element, and now we want to replace a child element to that parent element. So we say replace child, and the element that we want to replace is coming in second. As you can see here, I've put a description here. We want to first write the new element, then comma, and then the old element. So the new element is new child element, comma, and then the old element, old child element. So we're finding the old child element, going to that element's parent. On that parent, we're saying you should replace one of your children. You should replace it with this element, and the child who is to be replaced is this element, right? Let's see if it works. Okay, so we've got a replaced headline now, and as you can see here, it's in the DOM and it's an h2. So that worked. Great. You should pause the video, type this in, and make sure that it works before you go ahead. Okay. We can we have tried removing elements, we have created elements, we have replaced elements. Let's try to clone an element. And the way this method is built up is it's called cloneNode, and there is a boolean there that you should add if you wanted to clone the descendants as well. So all of the children and the children's children and the children's children's children will be cloned as well if you set this to true. So let's try this out. I want to, let's see. Well, first we will quickly construct a list of items to have something to clone. So let's try that first. But let's construct that. So we'll say new list. Set that to be equal to document createElement. Unordered list. So we'll create an unordered list, and we have to create some list items to put inside of that. And we'll set an ID for this new list. .id is equal to unordered list 3. So now we've got an unordered list in the memory in this variable, but not in the HTML DOM for now. And then we'll create a for loop, which creates how many? 4 list items for this unordered list. So for let I be equal to 0 as long as I is lesser than 5, because then it's the maximum is 4. We keep going and we add 1 every iteration. So we'll create a new list item here. Let the new list item be equal to document createElement, and that should be of the type list item. So now we've got a list item inside of this variable, right? And we want to add some text to it, otherwise we'll just have some bullet points and some nothing else. So we say new list item text content. We'll set that to be equal to, I use accent graphs here, number, and then we use the $ curly brackets, and we can put in I, or we can, which would start with 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. But I want to start with 1, so I say I plus 1. And then we want to append this new list item with this new text to our unordered list. We haven't put it into the HTML DOM yet. We're just appending it to the new list item up here, or the new list element, sorry. So we say new list dot append child. The child we want to append is a new list item. So we're doing this for each of our loops, right? We're creating list items and just adding them to our unordered list. And then we find the article tag in our HTML, and we append this unordered list to it. So let's try that. Let article be equal to document querySelector article. Okay, and then we want to say article appendChild. There we go, appendChild, and the child we want to append is new list. So by now, article should have a new list of 5 items with the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in it. Let's see what happens. Okay, that seems to work. And if we look at the DOM here, in the DOM inspector, you can see the unordered list with the ID UL3 and the numbers here. Okay, type this in and make sure that it works before you go ahead. You can pause the video and do that now. Okay, so let's try cloning this list after we have created it. And we'll try cloning it without the deep boolean first. So let's, I'll just write a note, let's clone without deep. And we do this, so we say let honor.list1 be equal to document dot querySelector, and it's got ID 3, this honor.list, so we can just find it by using that. So ul3, hashtag ul3, and then we try to clone this element to a new shallow clone. So let's try that, and I'm calling it shallow because it's not using the deep parameter. So I'll say clone shallow is equal to honor.list1, which is the element in the variable here, and then we say cloneNode, and we say false because we don't want it to clone deep. And we'll give the cloned element a new ID, otherwise we'll have some mess in using the same IDs. So we'll call that ul4. That's a new ID for it. And then we append it to the article tag, so that after the first list we'll get a new list. So let's say article dot appendChild, and we want to append the clone shallow element. So let's see what we get from this. It doesn't show up here. There are no elements in it, but it's there because we're using the clone shallow parameter, or we are using the deep parameter, and we have turned it off. We are using false. Then it doesn't bring the descendant elements. It doesn't take all of the child elements with it. So let's try it with deep. Let's clone with deep. Set to 2. So first of all, we'll create a new variable, clone deep, instead of clone shallow, and we'll set that to be equal to, we're cloning the same elements. So we're cloning the querySelector ul3, hashtag ul3, because it has ID 3. And we are, instead of having this on 2 lines as we do here, we're first finding the element, and then we're cloning the element and creating a new variable with that. We are gonna go ahead and do the cloning right away. So we can say cloneNode, and instead of false we say true this time. So instead of having these 2 lines here, right, we are basically writing everything in one line. We're just adding the .cloneNode true to our selection right away instead of doing it afterwards. And we want to add a new ID to this because we don't want the IDs to clash. So we'll set this to ul5. And we'll append it to article again. Article.appendChild. And the thing we want to append is clone deep. Okay, let's see what happens now. Okay, so now we've got 2 ordered lists. We've actually got ordered list, I'm saying. We've got two unordered lists, but we've actually got 3. We just have got the middle one doesn't have any items in it. But the unordered list down here has ID UL5 and has the same content as the first one. So we can clone elements and the descendants in one go if we want to, by using the deep flag set to true, right? Try typing this in, make sure that it works, test it. You can pause now and do that. Okay, if we want to be a bit more precise of where we want to put stuff, we can use the insertBefore. We don't always just want to append like we do with the 3 items that we just put in. So maybe we want to be a bit more precise of where we want to put things. So let's try this insertBefore. What happens is that we use the method insertBefore, and we have to figure out which element we want to put there, so that's the new element, and then which element we want the new element to appear before, so it will be a sibling that is previous to this element, right? So let's find the UL5 element here. Let UL5 be equal to document querySelector UL5. I want to add an H2 header right before this this unordered list. I want to have an H2 up here. So I'm finding the unordered list 5 first, and then I'm creating a new header. Document createElement, and I want to make an H2, and then we say, well, we want to add some text to it. New head dot text content, set that to be equal to header insertBefore, so that we know which one it is when we see it. And then we say UL5, which is our unordered list 5, and we find the parent element, because what we're doing here is we want to figure out where to place it, and to do that we need to find we need to insert our new element inside of the parent element and figure out which of the parent's children the new element should come in before. So we're finding the UL5 element first, and then we're saying UL5, your parent element, which is article, right? UL5, the parent is article. Then we say insertBefore, and what we want to put in there is the new head element, and the element that we want to put new head in before is the UL5 element, right? So we are actually saying inside of the article tag you should insert something before UL5, and the thing you should insert is new head. Let's see if it works. Okay, so we've got this H2 that has been inserted before UL5. So that's how you do that. Type this in, test that it works, and you can pause the video and do that now. Okay, let's try something out here. I'm gonna create a function called uClicked that we can put on things just to check if it works. So I'll create one here, function uClicked. We'll set that to be equal to, or not equal to, we'll make it come up with an alert box called uClicked. Okay, so now we've got this function uClicked, and if we call that here, we get the alert box, right? Good. So that works. And let's try adding some event listeners to our elements. Let's find the first list item on the page and add uClicked as an event listener to it when someone clicks on that first list item. We'll say let's new listener, I'm calling it equal to document query select, and that is the list item, and we'll add an event listener. And in this case we'll be listening for the click event, so we put click inside of quotation marks because it has to be a string, and we will call on the function uClicked. So let's see what happens here. If I click on this one, nothing happens, nothing, 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 and the first list item triggers it. This is because our querySelector is just finding the first item. So that's how that's done. Let's try to see if we can do something finding the rest of them actually. Let's do that. Maybe we can use something in the likes of, yeah, querySelectorAll list items. So let's find all list items is equal to document querySelectorAll list items. Alright, so let's try something here. So we say all list items for each, and we want to say we're gonna use an arrow function for these. I'm gonna go with finding the element and saying, yeah, I'm gonna do something here where we alert stuff. So I'm gonna create a new function here called, nope, I'm actually not. So we're what I want to do is I want to display the name of the tag, so list item would be it, and an eventual ID of the list item, if it has a list ID or an ID, sorry, or maybe drag out the inner HTML of it and show that in an alert box. Let's try that. So I want to do an alert clicked, and then I want to show the element, and I want to show the inner HTML of it. So this should find all of our list items on the page, any list items that are on the page, and if I click on any of them, I should get an alert box that returns the inner HTML of the item that I click on. Let's see what happens. You know what? I'm just running the functions instead of checking for clicks. So let's do that instead. Let's see. We have to do an element addEventListener, right? Yes, we do. And we set that to click. And what we do when it's clicked is we trigger this function. So let's do that function. And the content of the function is the alert. So what we're doing now is I'm finding all list items, right, with our querySelectorAll. And on these I'm going through with the forEach, and I'm grabbing the element that is the current element. And on that element I am adding an event listener called click. And if I click it, it triggers a function where it alerts clicked and the inner HTML of the object itself, of the element itself. Let's see if this works. So if I click on number 3, it should say number 3. Yes. Number 5. Yes. Number 1. Yes. Good. All right. And let's, for giggles, let's see what happens if we wanted to return the ID of the parent element as well. Parent ID. So elm.parent element.id. Let's see what happens. There we go. Parent ID honor.list3. Parent ID honor.list5. So we're good. So we can actually create something that finds all elements of a certain type or with a certain class name on them. If you have a lot of buttons that should do the same thing in a list of items, or I don't know, something like that. But depending on if let's say you have a gallery where you have a source image for each of the items, right? You can have a secondary attribute called data source or whatever, and then you pick the value from that data source and you use that to show the new image, for instance. That might be something we can look at for the next lesson. Yes, if you want to remove an event listener, again, you can do that as well. But first, let's. I will let you actually type in this code. Make sure that it works. Just pause the video and do that now. Okay, let's try removing event listeners again. You can do this either by doing like we've done here, by just removing it from all of them, or you can find a specific one and remove it from there. So let's try finding a specific one. Let's say document querySelector, and let's find the third list item that's on the page. So list item nth child. And we'll find the third of those, and then we want to remove an event listener. Remove event listener, and we have to specify which kind of event listener we're removing. So click, and we have to actually specify a name for it. And I'm wondering if I can do that here. I don't think I can. Let's see. Nope. 2 arguments required, only 1. Okay, so let's see. If I... Yeah, let's do something else here. Let's use the I clicked. The thing is that you have to specify a name for the function that you want to remove. And as long as I am using an anonymous function, which I am here, I can't remove it. So I will create a named one, and we'll put it there, and then we can remove it again. So let's see what happens if we actually have two functions put into it. I'll redo the uClicked function. Function uClicked alert uClicked. Okay, so we've got this function uClicked. Let's bind this to all of them instead. forEach, we don't need element because we're just gonna bind it to everyone. Yes, we are. We need element because we want to add the event listener. On click, we want to bind uClicked. Okay, and I should be able to actually call the function up here, even though it's written below, because the browser interprets all of the code first, and then you are able to do that. You should be able to do that. Let's see. Reference error. uClicked does not. I might be lying to you. No, I misspelled it. Let's see. Let's try again. Fail to execute, remove, yeah, I can't do that, but we know that. Yes, uClicked, good. uClicked, that's good. So, to remove our event listener, we can remove uClicked. So now on the third child element of the list items, the uClicked should be gone. Let's see that. Nothing there. If I click on number 2, it's there. If I click on number 4, it's there. It should be here as well, because this is the third element, this one. This is the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Alright, so it's still there, yes, and it's still there, yes. So you can remove an event listener like that. I'm sure there's some way of removing any event listener, but we're not going to touch on that today. Alright, try typing it in as it is now, just to see what happens. Feel free to save the code for the rest, just comment it out or whatever, and test it and make sure it works. And that is the lesson for today. So do that, make it work, and I'll speak to you during the lecture. Alright, have fun.